Boston in 1780. A man walks into a store with a stack of dollar bills. The store owner just laughs, says he won't even trade a loaf of bread for it. A few years ago, it would have bought several barrels of grain. This man's a war veteran. He fought in the Revolution. He trusted the government when they said the dollar was money. But now, it's not worth the paper it's printed on. His savings gone, his future stolen by politicians and their promises. That might sound like a made-up story, but it's not. That actually happened, and it's how the first US dollar died. Most Americans today have never heard of the Continental dollar, but it was real, and it collapsed completely. And the warning signs that led to its failure, many of them are starting to show up again. In this video, we're going to talk about how America's first currency died, what that collapse actually felt like for real people, and why the modern dollar might just be following the same path. The collapse of America's first dollar. In the early days of the American Revolution, there was no central bank, no IRS, no Federal Reserve, just 13 colonies trying to fight the most powerful empire in the world with nothing but grit and a whole lot of debt. So in 1775, the Continental Congress started printing money, not backed by gold, not backed by silver. It was backed by hope and promises. They called it the Continental dollar, and at first, it worked. Store owners accepted it. Soldiers were paid with it. People believed in the cause, so they believed in the currency. But then came the printing presses, and the war dragged on, and Congress, broke and desperate, kept printing more. By 1779, it took $40 in Continental dollars to buy what $1 could have bought just a few years earlier. By 1781, 2 years earlier, it was completely worthless. Now, to be fair, the British didn't help much. They printed counterfeit Continental dollars by the wagon load to flood the system and to try to destroy confidence in the new America. But the real damage, that came from within. Too much money printing and too few restraints. Does that sound familiar? This wasn't just an economic failure, it was personal. Imagine serving in a war, risking your life, getting paid in Continental dollars, only to come home and find out your money was worthless. This was the reality for many Americans back then. And people were furious. They felt betrayed and broken. That collapse left a scar so deep that for decades, Americans refused to trust paper money at all. The Continental dollar collapsed because the government printed too much of it and couldn't stop themselves. That's why, when the new US dollar was born years later, the founders swore they'd never let that happen again. And for a while, they didn't. But as you know, over time, those guardrails started to disappear. And that's what we'll look at next. The new dollar was designed to never fail again. So after the war was won and the dust finally settled, the founding fathers' question was simple. How do we build a real currency that people will actually trust? Because trust was gone. Burned by the Continental dollars, people wanted real money, not more paper promises. The founders took this very seriously. They didn't just draft a constitution, they drafted monetary guardrails. Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution says, "No state shall make anything but gold and silver coin a tender in payment of debts." Sounds pretty clear, right? But here's the catch. That only applied to the states, not the federal government, we later found out. Regardless, that declaration of using gold and silver coin wasn't random. That was a direct reaction to the chaos of the Continental dollar. They wanted money to mean something again. $1 equaled a fixed amount of silver, or a fraction of a gold coin. You could hold it in your hand, you could exchange it anywhere. You knew exactly what it was worth. And for a while, it worked, because it was a system built with limits. But slowly and legally, those limits started to fade away. The modern dollar was built to avoid another continental dollar disaster, but over time they began doing the exact same thing, just more quietly. As the years went on, they stopped pegging the dollar to gold and silver. They started running constant deficits. They flooded the system with credits and promises without the restraint. And that's when things really started to change, not all at once, but slowly, which brings us to today. What a second failure actually looks like. Most people think if the dollar ever fails again, it'll be obvious, a crash, a crisis, a total meltdown. But that's not how this works. Currencies don't usually die in chaos. They die quietly, through a slow erosion over time. So what does a second failure look like? It looks like this. Your money buys less every year while you're told inflation is low. You're compelled to invest in risk assets just to keep up with inflation. Your savings don't grow, they actually lose value in real terms. Wages stagnate, prices rise, and the government keeps increasing debt just to keep things functioning. The dollar today isn't collapsing like the continental dollar, but it's quietly lost over 95% of its purchasing power since 1913, which was, wait for it, the same year the Federal Reserve was created. Coincidence? Maybe, but let me know what you think in the comments below. Real money is supposed to hold value, but today's dollar, not so much. And we're told this is normal, that supposed 2% inflation is healthy, that unlimited debt is somehow sustainable, that a dollar created with keystrokes is somehow just as good as one earned through labor. And maybe the worst part is, so many of us have gotten used to it. The continental dollar failed because trust outpaced fiscal restraint. And now, once again, we're running on trust with very little restraint remaining. So the real question isn't if it fails again, it's when. History doesn't always repeat, but it often rhymes. Back in 1780, you could see the failure coming. Prices exploded, people rejected the continental dollars. The collapse was fast and loud. But today, it's happening differently, more polite, more digital, more managed. But underneath the surface, it's the same thing. Too much debt, too much money created out of thin air, and maybe not enough trust to hold it all together. Let's step back real quick and look at how this played out before, and you tell me if it feels familiar today. Back then, with the continental dollar, they printed money to fund a war. Today, they print dollars to fund just about everything. Wars, bailouts, deficits, interest payments. It never stops. Back then, the currency wasn't backed by anything solid. Today, it's pure fiat. That means by agreement. No gold or silver backing as originally intended. Back then, Britain tried to sabotage the continental dollar by flooding the market with counterfeit dollars. Today, other countries don't even bother. They're just dumping treasuries and quietly walking away from the dollar. And back then, public trust collapsed pretty quickly. Now, it's much slower, but you can feel it. People are losing faith. Yes, it was a different time, but it's the same math. So where does that leave us? This is your wake-up call. So now you know, every fiat currency in history has failed. It's not some grand conspiracy. It's just easier not to be fiscally responsible. The continental dollar failed, and now we're slipping again, slowly, legally, quietly. So don't ask if the dollar could fail. It already has, and in some ways, it might be happening again. Listen, I don't know what to say, but I'm not hopeful. To me, the direction is clear. The when, not so much. Hopefully not in our lifetimes, but that's probably wishful thinking. This isn't about trying to panic you. It's about trying to help you see things clearly so you can start thinking differently and maybe start preparing for a future that looks a lot different than what we're used to. I really appreciate you watching, and thank you to my viewer, Thomas Jefferson 4358, for inspiring the video. And if you want something fitting to close this out, check out this song, The Day the Dollar Died by Peter Tosh. I'll link it up here. This guy, in my opinion, was 50 years ahead of his time. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.